Last week we read a letter of Aurobindo speaking of 4 cardinal defects, especially pertaining to the vital nature. The first one being vanity and arrogance. The second being, and all that accompanies it, of course, because many things can accompany vanity and arrogance, and it can take many disguises. And its most convenient disguise is, of course, of being a superior sadhak. As someone asked once another person in the ashram that, who do you think are advanced sadhaks in the ashram? And the reply was very interesting. This person called him very close, said, I'll reveal to you, but please don't tell anyone else. So the revelation came, there are only 2 advanced sadhaks in the ashram, Aurobindo and the mother. So it is so true. This can take so many disguises. Then apart from vanity and arrogance, there is, Aurobindo tells us, disobedience. Disobedience with reference to not X or Y or Z, but disobedience with regard to truth, with regard to mother and Aurobindo. And that's why they were so careful that once when someone was asking mother for some work, she would not really give a particular work. She would say, do as you like, or you can pick and choose this, that. So after many months, when this lady asked mother that, you have not been telling me what exactly I should do. Why don't you just tell me? Why do you want me to choose? It is so simple. See, we sometimes feel that how nice if mother could physically tell us, do this. The problem is over. But on the contrary, this adds to the problem. And as the mother revealed, she said, if I tell you that you must do this, and then you disobey it, it's a very serious, it has very serious spiritual consequences. Because if mother says do this, it's the voice of truth. And therefore, to save us from those consequences, she was letting people choose. So when we make a choice in ignorance, error, she's there behind, she leads us through our path. But she would seldom say, do this, do that. And she said, I say this only to those who are very close to me and I know that they will not disobey. So second defect was disobedience, and the third was dissimulation and falsification of speech. Aurobindo tells us it's universal, because we all the time either exaggerate or say minimize. We always give only one side of the story, and of course that one side is our own side of the story, and so on and so forth. So dissimulation of speech, which can take many forms, including the tone. Sometimes when we are describing something, just by a little change of tone, we can convey a very different meaning, a meaning that suits our purpose. So this is the third kind of principal defect. And of course, Aurobindo would tell us that the fourth defect is these doubts which come, the doubts, the dangerous habit of justification. These dangerous habits of justification is, of course, again very universal. Whatever we do, we always have a reason for it. And it's usually the other way around, that we first do and then we justify and find a reason for it. But it seems so automatic to our human consciousness that we don't even pause to think that we have actually acted on impulse, and then we find a justification. And when it comes to spiritual life, it's very, very dangerous. Now, apart from this, there are many. This is just a small little trailer. And there are many hordes of these dasyus, panis, vritras, which we find in the Vedas, which are hiding and always ready to pull us down at the least opportunity. And they are so carefully hidden, so neat. Sometimes they assume all kinds of appearances that it's really very difficult to play the detective. So it's very difficult to root them out one by one, because it's like plucking one thorn after another. And by the time one has moved to the 4th thorn, the first has again started coming up. It's a very challenging task. And Aurobindo gives us these 3 methods: aspiration, surrender, and rejection, to fulfill it. Of course, aspiration is a little more difficult, but surrender comes the easiest, because that's the easiest thing to say, that Mother, I have surrendered myself to you. the aspiration comes a little more difficult. But the most difficult is rejection, especially when Sri Aurobindo qualifies that rejection is not just a mental, moral, ethical, or social control. These things are good, they are helpful, they go to a large extent, they shape our humanity, they make us less animal, but that's where they can lead us at the most to a controlled humanity, not at all a transformed humanity. And especially in yoga, as Sri Aurobindo would tell us that the mental control begins to get slowly replaced by the psychic control. So whenever there is a transfer of governance, that is the time which is the most difficult period. So far humanity has evolved under the stress of mental control. Of course, some people can also exercise the control of a vital will. But whenever the transfer has to be to the psychic, that's the time when it's a difficult period, because the normal mental controls are lost and the psychic and spiritual control has not yet taken over. So it makes the path really long. Even in ordinary yogas, Sri Aurobindo says in one of the letters, it takes at least 12 years for purification. And this is indispensable. Mother speaks of an indispensable purification, without which to speak of transformation is simply idle intellectual curiosity, nothing more than that. She speaks of the indispensable purification, and Sri Aurobindo says at least 12 years. Even in traditional yogas, people patiently wait before they can have the first glimpses. In this yoga, it is even much more, because one doesn't have to just modify the nature for escape, but the nature has to be made ready and fit for the greater play of the greater forces, which can completely break it down under their pressure or take it into a very different direction. Sri Aurobindo says in the synthesis that as we move on in the yoga, quite naturally the energies that begin to move a human being are far stronger and far greater, because this is the nature of this yoga. It's not the quietistic escape. So one opens from the lower nature and gets into a range of consciousness which is far greater and far higher. But there the danger is, even at that point, one can develop along the lines of a titanic being. Sri Aurobindo safeguards it us by cautioning that even this ego, that I am an instrument of the divine, can lead to a total aggrandization. So one starts the journey very well, very beautifully, in a very modest way. But as one experiences a greater and greater influx of a greater energy, a greater light, a greater consciousness, a greater ananda, one can very easily be led into this belief that one is after all a great instrument doing great work of the divine, and that one small step in the long run can take one to a totally different direction, the direction of a titanic kind of humanity. So how much caution and vigil is required, that Sri Aurobindo says till the last irrevocable transformation one has to keep a vigil. But this is not easy. Not easy first because nature would not let go of the rein. First, there are 3 knots in the Vedas. Is described this famous story of Sunishep. Sunishep is a man who is tied to the stake with 3 knots. And poor fellow is crying, relieve me, but nobody is there to relieve him. Then Varuna comes and Varuna takes pity. Varuna is the god of vastness. So Varuna comes, and it's very beautifully described that he cuts the first knot and throws it upward. Then Varuna cuts the second knot and throws it to the sides. Then he cuts the third knot and lets it drop to the ground. It's very, very interesting that why he does this kind of gesture. And the 3 knots with which human beings are tied by nature, and it won't let us go, is the knot of ignorance, desire, and ego. We can relate them also to the 3 modes, that the first knot, which is the tightest knot, is the knot of ignorance. And nature gives us a prison, makes us eat, drink, and we are ignorant even of ourselves. We are ignorant of any seeking. We are ignorant of a destiny. We are ignorant of anything other than the immediate surroundings. We don't even know it's a prison. It's like in a prison, if it is pitch dark, one doesn't see the bars also. And one doesn't know that actually I am in a prison. There must be some light even to recognize that one is in a prison house. So this is the first knot, the thickest of all knots. But by the very fact that one begins to have some kind of a turning or seeking, that knot is gone. So the second knot, when out of the prison of ignorance one is slightly ready to graduate, it's not that ignorance is gone, but it puts another knot, the knot of desire. So from one prison we graduate into another prison. And in that knot of desire, or the prison of desire, it's like second class prison. So all that we seek, it is provided to us. Oh, you seek happiness? Fine, we will provide you. You seek knowledge? We will provide you. You seek love? We will provide you. And it's so mesmerizing, its place, so complex, so many-sided, that for a long time we again do not know that this also is a prison. Then when God takes pity on us, He begins to give us blows. He starts, instead of fulfilling the desires, in first stage God fulfills desire. When in the early days, my early days, when I had come to ashram, then somebody told me very good, simple advice. He said, don't be misled if whatever you desire, mother fulfills it. This she does in the beginning, but as you move on, she stops doing this. So be prepared that all the desires will be hammered. This is a very sane advice, so very true. So after a while, God takes pity and He says, enough of the fulfillment of desires, now I'm going to take them away, one after another. So, this prison begins to break. It's a prison of our illusion. So we get disillusioned. Then the next step is, after we have gone through a little phase of depression, there is another prison, the prison of the sattvic ego or the mental ego. And all the ideas of the mind, God is this, God is that, God is not this, God is not that, this is good, this is bad, all kinds of ideas, opinions, preferences of an intellectual kind, that is the third prison. And this looks, we have really arrived. But even this is a golden bar. This is well known in the traditions, these three knots with which we are tied. And it's difficult to get rid of them because we are identified with it. This is our identity. What am I without my desires? What am I without my ideas and opinions? I must take, this is my, not just an intellectual opinion, but this is me. And if this is gone, if this is contradicted, then I am gone. So this can go to any extent, so much so that people, when they see their ideas smashed to the ground, they almost feel that they have lost their life. It is known. I mean, they hold on to it by a kind of tenacious strength. So ignorance, desire and ego, these are the three knots. Even when we are released from it, sometimes nature hands us the key. Then when the key is there, the sentinels on the gates, even of the mental ego, are doubt and denial. So we want to put the key and doubt will tell us, what is this? What key? You think you can open the prison with this key? You think there is a better world out there? You be here. This is very good. Don't be a fool. All these people who go to Pondicherry and other ashramas are little bit crazy people. Live by the practical advice. So it won't allow us to use the key because doubt keeps pushing us back again and again. Even when we have used the key, it says, okay, fine. Either you free yourself from the jail or I will make you master of the jail. So we become master of our nature. The typical image of the yogi sitting on the whirlpool of nature. Sri Aurobindo has a beautiful poem to that. Yogi on the whirlpool. He sits atop nature. And that is the symbol of some of the great yogis, ascetic par excellence, Shiva himself, who sits on the dead flesh of lion. So he is not only conquered the nature, nature is dead and below his feet. And he is sitting on it and meditating. So this is the kind of possibilities it allows. But Sri Aurobindo is not happy even with that. So he says, this jail must change into an ashrama. He had already done it. Before this ashrama was established, Sri Aurobindo had already done a little miniature experiment. That's how I look at it, when he was in Alipur jail. And he describes it in so many words, that he saw them and how these people lived, how they played, how they grew. This was a miniature experiment on a little section of humanity. Of course, Sri Aurobindo has not used this word that I did an experiment. He is too humble to say that. But his mere presence molded them. And he could see how far things could go, how far humanity could respond. So he wants this prison of the ego, this prison of the world, to be transformed into a divine garden of delight. So the cosmic powers won't allow it. Which means that if this happens, men will grow equal to the gods. In Upanishads, there is a very interesting phrase that gods they want to keep men under their thumb. So they don't mind if we worship them. They like to grant boons. But they don't want us to go beyond them. Because the moment we go, they become our equal, like brothers and sisters. So this is not a very comfortable position for the gods, because then nobody will worship them. So gods don't like it. They like us to remain little bit below. Men are the cattle of the gods. The mother speaks of three kinds of forces or beings who arrange for the tests in integral yoga, and they will not let us go. One is the force of universal nature. So this is natural, this is normal, why should we change? This is one of the problems. And it can go very far, much later, almost in 50s, late 50s. We can imagine that from 1920 mother is there and the ashram has formed around 26. So almost 30 years with a physical presence. She says, of course she doesn't lament, but one can imagine the deep compassion in her words, where she says, at least some people have begun to feel the necessity of a change. Most do not even feel that there is a need to change. This is true of all of us to an extent, that how much time it takes just to feel that we need to change. We are all the time busy changing everyone else. So universal nature will not allow. Even when that allows, she says the second line is the adverse and the hostile forces. They will not allow. They will throw heaps of troubles, difficulties, and Sri Aurobindo describes one level after another. When we throw it out of the mind, they attack the vital. Throw out of the vital, then they attack the body with all kinds of problems, illnesses. Not that every illness is an attack of adverse and vital forces. They may simply be pharyngitis and laryngitis. Then of course, even when they are thrown out of that, they take refuge in the subconscious, and from there they spring up and they can attack the person, and it can go on for a long time. And the third, she says, spiritual and divine forces. We have stories in Puranas of Indra, of all the people, not helping at all. After a stage, he becomes an obstacle. He says, you want to go beyond? Let me see, are you ready or not? So they give all kinds of allurements. From individual desires, we can move into cosmic desires, cosmic ignorance, cosmic fulfillment. So the third kind of reason why we don't easily, these forces don't leave the place for transformation, is because we move from individual ignorance to cosmic ignorance and cosmic consciousness, where everything gets multiplied tenfold. And Sri Aurobindo tells us the sadhak has to fight not only his own personal battle, which is hard enough, but the battle of all of whom he is a representative type. Battle of those who are around him, the battle of those whose consciousness begins to interpenetrate and mingle with his own consciousness. So that makes this yoga a lot more difficult, and a great amount of patience is necessary, and it takes really long. So what is to be done if none of these things really help us? We have to touch the central knot of the difficulty. And now we will see how two ways, one the way of Sri Aurobindo and then the way of the mother. And it's very interesting to read them. One, like a father, advises us, guides us, tells us, do this, this is the way to come out. The other, like a mother, gives us a very, very beautiful, different and simple advice. And depending on, of course, the two can be combined. That is the best. But we'll just read some passages from Synthesis, where Sri Aurobindo gives us this advice about how to reject truly. This rejection is not mental control. It's not about just suppression of things, but a separation. And from that inner poise to refuse to give sanction to the movement of nature. Now when we refuse to give sanction by the force of past habit, which is not just individual habit but habit of millions of years, we continue to do the same thing over and over again. But if we persist in the refusal, after a time the force of Prakriti becomes lesser and lesser and lesser, which means not to justify but to keep rejecting persistently. A time comes that this force becomes weaker and weaker, and just a little movement of rejection and the movement stops. Just a little we can hold on and it stops. That means not to allow these movements to express in the external consciousness, give them an inner refusal. Now even then sometimes they do express, and yet to stay firm, to get up after that again and keep walking with that thing in mind that this is not acceptable. So Sri Aurobindo's words, And here he also says that why this purification is necessary, because we need to make this nature an instrument for the greater light. The entanglement is great. The complete purification of one instrument depends on the complete purification too of all the other. This is the other difficulty. One cannot purify the mind unless emotions are purified. One cannot purify the emotions unless thoughts are purified. And one cannot purify either unless the will is purified. And finally, one cannot purify all of them unless the body itself is holding it. So in supramental manifestation, Sri Aurobindo says the difficulty is dual. Psychological and corporeal. The body itself is a slave to these habits, and he knows it. But we have on the other hand this advantage that one important instrument sufficiently purified can be used as a means for the purification of the others. So one step that he suggests is that while we are still laboring in ignorance, we need to at least refine things and add a sattvic taste to whatever we are doing. A really perfect enjoyment of existence, which is the purpose of vital, can only come when what we enjoy is not the world in itself or for itself, but God in the world. But the ananda of the spirit in things that forms the real, essential object of our enjoying, and things only as form and symbol of the spirit, waves of the ocean of ananda. But this ananda can only come at all when we can get at and reflect in our members the hidden spiritual being. This is the other problem of a pure rational control. Rational control stifles the part. So, but they seek their own fulfillment. In Savitri, the other day we read this line, each part in us desires its absolute. So after a time, when we are too much obsessed with the idea of mental control, we enter into a negative pietistic state. And a greater ananda cannot find its play. So, Sri Aurobindo tells us, meanwhile, there is a just and permissible, a quite legitimate human enjoyment of these things, before we can spiritually reflect, which is predominantly sattvic in its nature. It is an enlightened enjoyment, principally by the perceptive, aesthetic, and emotive mind, secondarily only by the sensational, nervous, and physical being, but all subject to the clear government of the buddhi. So this is one of the ways that he suggests as a preliminary clearing. But this is not enough. Then he speaks of the central control, the ego principle and the desire principle. So there he says the mental Purusha has to separate himself from association and self-identification with this desire mind. Every time desire arises, we have to remind ourselves of what Sri Aurobindo said in one of the beautiful short 3-word letter, eat your desire, when Sahanadi said, I have a strong desire to eat prawns. And she asked Sri Aurobindo, can I eat prawns? Not that this can be a universal principle for everybody, but Sri Aurobindo wrote back, eat your desire. So here Sri Aurobindo is telling us another way, separate from this identification, and he has to say, the mind has to tell the desire, I am not this thing that struggles and suffers. Because the moment we deny a desire, it will struggle and suffer. So it has to say, I am not this thing that struggles and suffers, grieves and rejoices, loves and hates, hopes and is baffled, is angry and afraid, and cheerful and depressed, a thing of vital moods and emotional passion. All these are merely workings and habits of Prakriti in the sensational and emotional mind. So it draws back the sanction. This very beautifully revealed in Sri Aurobindo's poem, the Vedantin's Prayer, which Sri Aurobindo has explained as it is the prayer of the Asura seeking to convert himself. So it is a prayer where one separates between these two parts and say, this is not me, that is me. So all these things, often we say all life is yoga means everything is fine. Sri Aurobindo tells us everything is not okay, and even though all life has to change into yoga, one has to reject the stronghold of the lower nature, which takes a long time. The mind then draws back its emotions and becomes with these the observer or witness. It observes them as if in a sort of action and play on a mental stage of personage other than itself. Mother speaks of it in another way. She says that we must project everything on a kind of cinema screen in front and see what are the movements that we need to keep with us and what is no more part of us. And if we do it persistently, it helps. Then it's not enough for the desire mind to be rejected. He says there must also be the rejection at the level of thought. The desire mind must also be rejected from the instrument of thought. And this is best done by the detachment of the Purusha from thought and opinion itself. The method will be the same. What is the method? This too I am not. So one separates and says, this too I am not. I am not the thought or the thinker. All these ideas, opinions, speculations, strivings of the intellect, its predilection, preferences, dogmas, doubts, self-corrections are not myself. All this is only a working of Prakriti. We know synthesis was between 1914 to 1919. It is very difficult for human nature to do. So 1920 mother comes and she takes charge. She tells us another way. And this is really a delight to read it. First, she says purification is indispensable. She says absolutely what Aurobindo has said is right. We have to purify ourselves. So many people doubt the effectiveness of the protection, the safety of the path, because others go astray. And in their egoism, they tremble with fear instead of telling themselves, what I have just been reading to you this evening. What is the cause of all catastrophes, small or great, which threaten those who follow the path of yoga without having taken the necessary care to be sufficiently pure and sincere? No protection, no grace can save those who refuse the indispensable purification. It is almost like hitting us right where it hurts. So immediately, like a very, very compassionate mother, look at the change in her tone. She says, and I would add this, that fear is an impurity. Says, do not be afraid that this cannot be, that cannot be. One of the greatest impurities, one of those which come most directly from the anti-divine forces, which want to destroy the divine action on earth. And the first duty of those who really want to do yoga is to eliminate from their consciousness with all the might, all the sincerity, all the endurance, even the shadow of a fear, whether it be physical, vital, emotional, anything, to eliminate fear, an indomitable courage, a perfect sincerity, and a sincere self-giving can truly shelter you from all danger. She has said that. Then someone asks a question, Mother, when we come to you, we try to be at our best possible. That is to have every good thought. But often on the contrary, all the bad impulses, bad thoughts come. Now it happens even around Samadhi. Even when we are face to face with the divine. In the ashram itself, the worst kind of things come out. So the person is asking, why this happens? So mother says, that is perhaps so that you can get rid of them. How beautiful. If they come, one can offer them and ask to be rid of them. Now she is telling us a simpler way, that when you come before me, I will take away your robe of virtue. Aurobindo has this aphorism, that when divine took away my robe of vice, I let it go. But when he took away my robe of virtue, I resisted. Because that is very difficult to, feel. That is the story of Krishna and the gopis when they are taking a bath and Krishna steals the clothes and says, now, do you have the courage to stand before me just as you are? Not with any of those makeups and nice ornaments that you like to look good. So she says that it comes out, now you offer them to me. That perhaps is the reason. It is because the consciousness acts for purification. It is no use at all hiding things and pushing them behind like this. We put under the carpet. There is a story of somebody who was, it's a little joke of course. Somebody was going in the bus and one person saw in his hand something and said, oh, this is sticking, this could be a bomb. He said, bomb, put it under his seat. So, we do it all the time. not realizing that it doesn't matter, it's going to, one day burst, nevertheless. And imagining they are not there because one has put a veil in front. It is much better to see oneself as one is, provided one is ready to give up this way of being. So the other catch is that we say, I am what I am. Mother says that's not enough. To acknowledge I am what I am should be accompanied by the next movement, I don't want to be this. And that has to be persistent. If you come allowing all the bad movements to rise to the surface, to show themselves, if you offer them, if you say, well, this is how I am, and if at the same time you have the aspiration to be different, then this second of presence is extremely useful. Mother, this is in me, this is what I am, please help me. And her grace works the miracle. You can, yes, in a few seconds, receive the help you need to get rid of them. While if you come like a little saint, the most dangerous, repeatedly she tells us, don't come like a little saint, and go away content without having received anything, it is not very useful. So when we try to pose like a little saint, it's the most dangerous. Automatically the consciousness acts like that. It is like the ray that brings light where there wasn't any. Only what is needed is to be in a state where one wants to give up the thing, to get rid of it, not to cling to it and keep to it. If one sincerely wants to pull it out of oneself, make it disappear, then it is very useful. And then she says something very interesting. Indeed, I could ask a question myself. Why? I don't know if it is common, but still, why? When you come to me, do you want to have good thoughts and be at your best? For what reason? Imagine, mother is asking us. Why do you want to look very nice? When do we go to mother? When we are hungry, when we are dirty. We say, mother, I have played enough, I have rolled in the mud, I am very dirty, can you please clean me up? And she takes a right superpower divine rinse soap and cleanses us. So we, of course, it's different that we have a bad habit of going back into the mud. But every time we come, patiently she cleans us. And one day we understand that no, this is not good to keep playing all the time in that mud. There are better ways of playing. Then the person asks, to have bad movements before you is very ugly. Mother laughs. If you want to keep them, yes, it is very ugly. But if you want to get rid of them, it is perhaps a chance to get rid of them. It is surely even an opportunity to get rid of them, because before me, they appear exactly as they are. We cannot deceive the divine. There is that story of Hanuman going to Rama, and he asks him all kinds of intellectual questions, because Sugriva is doubting whether he is really sent by Bali or he is actually someone else. So Hanuman poses all kinds of intellectual questions and Rama answers with equal intellectual answers. At last he recognizes and he says, my God, you are my Lord, I have taken your name all my life. Then he chides Rama that, why didn't you tell me? I am an ignorant monkey. I am asking you questions, why didn't you reveal yourself? He says, because you came like an intellectual, just as you are, it appeared before me, so I was responding to you. This inner truth comes out in front of the divine and the divine responds according to that. So she says that so that they appear exactly as they are. While far from me, they are colored with all sorts of brilliant and false lights, so that you take them for what they are not. If the movement is nasty and you see it in my atmosphere, it appears exactly as it is. To give the best one has is very fine and is much appreciated. Mother is saying, yes, that also should be given. But to give the worst one has is much more useful. Perhaps this offering is even more appreciated on condition that it is given in order to get rid of it, not to take it back afterwards. And a final word of advice Mother gives us, which reminds us of a little story. Hercules is given 7 tasks. And it's very interesting. His name is Hercules and, Hercule actually. And actually, all of us can be Mother's Coolie, so Hercule. So, he is given the task. And out of 7 tasks, they are very symbolic. They are tasks of purification. One task is taming the animal like that, difficult task. So the last task is that he must clean the Aegean stables. Now this is a stable where there are many, many horses. Now how to clean it? Because by the time he would reach the 10th or 15th horse, one day is over. So the first horse has already started dirtying the place again. So how should one clean it? So Hercules does a very smart thing. He doesn't clean the Aegean stables one by one. He goes, there is a nearby river, I forget the name, and he just makes a canal, a channel, and the river water starts gushing towards the stable. Now once the river water starts gushing towards the stable, automatically by the water, all the horses are cleaned in one go, because the water just cleanses it. So final word of advice he gives us is this: when the force which is at work is stronger, more insistent, naturally what resist as strongly. So she tells us not to despair, not to be afraid, because she has told us, because the light is there, the darkness comes out to resist, and when the force is stronger, the resistance is also stronger. That is why she has said darkness is densest just before the dawn. And if instead, it is here I have to say something that's not very pleasant. If instead of, and it's amazing, mother is telling us something which is extremely pleasant, and she is telling us not very pleasant. If instead of being hypnotized by your little difficulties, your little inconveniences, your small discomforts, your big defects, big she puts under quotes, your big defects, if instead of being hypnotized by all that, you tried to see the other side, how much more powerful the force is, the grace more active, the help more tangible. In a word, if you were a little less egoistic and less concentrated on yourself and had a little wider vision. In one place in a prayer she says, don't keep monitoring yourself that how much you have progressed, how much this has gone, how much that has gone. She says concentrate on the other side. The force, how much more powerful the force is, the grace more active, the help more tangible. In a word, if you were a little less egoistic and less concentrated on yourself and had a little wider vision in which you could include things that don't concern you personally, perhaps your view of the problem would change. So if we were so preoccupied with this idea of just giving ourselves to her and to the work, then things could go much faster. So these are some of the methods Sri Aurobindo and the mother give us to separate. Of course, first they talk of the buddhi, exercising right control, right conduct, aesthetic enjoyment, a sattvic governance of life. Then he speaks of separating the purusha from the prakriti, sanctioning, refusing, no, this is not acceptable, this is not me, not me, not me. It's a traditional way. Sri Aurobindo says it works well. Then the mother speaks of these movements, come out, offer them, and put them before the light. And finally she says, forget about all these, your little defects and big defects, and just remember the grace, this wonderful grace, this force, this help, which is ever available. And in one of the places he says, the son of divine delight, the son of divine laughter, its help which is readily available, if only we can open ourselves to that. So we'll close it here, and next week we'll meet again.